The red dust of Veridia clung to Lieutenant Elian Novik's uniform as he hauled another crate of medical supplies from the transport. 3 months into the humanitarian mission, and the grit had worked its way into everything: clothes, equipment, even the creases of his palms. But it was the haunted eyes of the Veridian refugees that had truly gotten under his skin. "Last one for this sector," Elian called to his teammate Kira, who was organizing distribution with the local elders. The Civil War had devastated what was once considered the jewel of the Andromeda Alliance: cities reduced to rubble, farmlands scorched, and a population traumatized by years of conflict. As he set down the crate, a movement caught his eye. A small figure darted between the makeshift shelters, quick, furtive, with the pale blue skin and iridescent markings distinctive to young Veridians. "Hey there," Elian called softly, crouching to appear less intimidating. "It's okay, we're here to help." After a moment's hesitation, a young female Veridian stepped into view. She couldn't have been more than 12 in human years, though Veridian aging was difficult to gauge precisely. Her large, almond-shaped eyes glowed amber in the fatting light, and intricate patterns of luminescence pulsed along her forearms, a biological trait that would become more pronounced in adulthood. "You are from Earth?" she asked in carefully practiced standard English. Elian nodded, surprised by her command of the language. "Yes, my name is Elian." "I am Thalia," she replied, approaching cautiously. "I have been learning your language from the education modules you brought last month." "You've learned quickly," Elian said, genuinely impressed. "Most adults take years to get this good." A hint of pride flickered across her features. "My father was a linguist before." She gestured vaguely toward the horizon where smoke still rose from recent bombardments. "I'm sorry," Elian said, the words feeling woefully inadequate. Thalia shrugged with a resilience that made his heart ache. "Are there more books in this shipment? The modules only contained basic communication." "Actually," Elian smiled, reaching into his pack, "I brought something special." He pulled out a small data tablet. "It's loaded with Earth literature, science texts, history. It's my personal device, but I want you to have it." Her eyes widened, luminescent patterns flaring with excitement. "Truly. Truly, knowledge shouldn't be a casualty of war." For the next several days, whenever his duties allowed, Elian would find Thalia waiting near the distribution center, eager to share what she'd learned or ask questions about Earth. Her quick mind and curiosity were a bright spot amid the desolation. On the final day of their deployment to this region, Elian helped distribute emergency rations. The food shortage had grown critical, making the simple meal packets precious resources. "This will sustain your community until the next supply drop," he explained to the gathered refugees. As families collected their allocations, Thalia appeared at his side, helping organize the younger children. For the first time since he'd met her, she laughed, a melodic sound that turned heads. Several elder Veridians exchanged meaningful glances. "What?" Elian asked her, smiling at the rare moment of joy. "I was imagining visiting Earth someday," she admitted, "seeing oceans and mountains that aren't scarred by war." "You'd like it there," he said warmly. "Maybe you'll visit when peace comes." An older Veridian nearby interjected. "She would need a sponsor to travel to Earth. Our kind are not freely permitted in your system." Elian, wanting to maintain the lightness of the moment, joked, "Well, when you're grown up, maybe I'll marry you, then you could visit any time." He winked at Thalia, who giggled again. The elder Veridians exchanged another look, one Elian missed entirely. "I must return to my post," Elian said, checking his comm unit. "Keep learning, Thalia. Knowledge builds bridges between worlds." That evening, as the Earth transport prepared for departure, Elian caught a glimpse of Thalia watching from a distance, the tablet clutched to her chest. He waved, and she raised her hand in response, her forearm glowing more brightly than he'd seen before. The transport doors sealed, and as they lifted off, Veridia's red landscape blurred below them. Another crisis, another mission completed. In time, the memory of the bright-eyed Veridian girl would fade, replaced by new assignments and new worlds in need. But on the surface below, Thalia watched the ship disappear into the clouds, her fingers tracing the symbols on her arm that had begun to form a new pattern, one that, in Veridian culture, signified a promise received and a bond acknowledged. A promise she intended to honor. 10 years had transformed Earth's skyline. New towers of gleaming carbon alloy and transparent aluminum stretched toward the clouds, symbols of humanity's prosperity since joining the Galactic Cooperative. From his office window on the 87th floor of the Interstellar Relations Building, Ilian Novak hardly noticed the view anymore. At 35, he'd settled into a respected position as chief engineer for humanitarian infrastructure. The field work of his 20s, the crisis deployments, the adrenaline of emergency responses, had given way to administrative duties and technical oversight. His hands were cleaner these days, though sometimes he missed the grit. "Commander Novak," his assistant's voice chimed through the comm. "The Veridian delegation has arrived early. They're requesting your presence at the welcoming ceremony." Ilian frowned at the interrupted workflow on his holographic display. "That's scheduled for tomorrow. Protocol dictates." "Sir, their lead ambassador specifically asked for you, by name." This was unusual. While Ilian had helped design infrastructure for Veridia's post-war reconstruction, he hadn't been planetside in years. Any Veridians he'd known would be dealing with higher-ranked officials. "Fine, I'll be down in 20 minutes. The grand reception hall buzzed with diplomatic staff and security personnel. A group of Veridians stood at the center, tall, striking figures whose blue skin now contained intricate luminescent patterns that pulsed with subtle light. Their species had evolved the bioluminescence as a communication method, each pattern conveying emotional states and social status. As Ilian approached, a female Veridian turned toward him. Something in her posture, a sudden alertness, made him hesitate. Her amber eyes locked onto his, and recognition crashed through him like a physical force. Thalia. She was no longer the small, cautious girl he remembered. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, her form was lithe but powerful, draped in ceremonial armor that accentuated her warrior status. The luminescent patterns on her skin formed complex designs that rippled with what he recognized as anticipation. "Lieutenant Ilian Novak," she said, her voice deeper than he remembered but carrying the same careful precision. "Though I see it is Commander now." "Yes, it's been 10 years, 3 months, and 17 days, she finished, her expression unreadable to human eyes. "I have come for you." The diplomatic staff exchanged confused glances. This wasn't standard protocol for any interplanetary relations they were familiar with. "Perhaps we should speak privately," Ilian suggested, gesturing toward a conference room off the main hall. Once alone, Thalia's formal demeanor softened slightly. "You do not seem pleased to see me." "I'm surprised," Ilian admitted. "Last time I saw you, I was a child," she said. "Now I am ranked first ambassador and war matron of the 7th House." Ilian studied her, trying to reconcile his memory with the formidable woman before him. "Congratulations. That's quite an achievement for someone so young." "I had motivation," she said simply. "Knowledge builds bridges between worlds, you taught me that." The familiar phrase from so long ago triggered more memories. The tablet he'd given her, the jokes they'd shared, the promises. "Thalia, why did you say you've come for me specifically?" Her luminescence shifted patterns, a cascade of bright pulses flowing down her arms. "You promised to marry me when I was grown. I have come to fulfill our vow." Ilian's breath caught. "That was, I made a joke, a small kindness to a child in a terrible situation." Thalia's patterns dimmed slightly. In Veridian culture, spoken promises create soul bonds, especially those made during times of suffering or need. She moved closer, her presence commanding the space. "Your words weren't just comfort to me, Ilian. They became my purpose." "I didn't know," he said quietly, the weight of cultural misunderstanding settling uncomfortably on his shoulders. "Now you do," her expression softened. "I don't expect an immediate answer. Our delegation will be here for 1 month. It is time enough for you to honor or formally release the promise." Before he could respond, she placed a small crystalline object on the table between them. "My quarters are in the diplomatic wing. This will grant you access when you wish to speak further." With that, she turned and left the room, leaving Ilian staring at the crystal, his ordered life suddenly thrown into beautiful chaos by a promise he never knew he'd made. The following days passed in a blur of diplomatic functions and awkward encounters. Ilian couldn't avoid Thalia entirely. Her position as first ambassador placed her at every major negotiation, but he'd managed to keep their interactions strictly professional. Until tonight. The crystal pulsed softly in his palm as he stood outside her quarters, questioning his decision to come. After a week of deliberation, he'd realized they needed to resolve this misunderstanding before it complicated the sensitive trade negotiations. At least that's what he told himself. The door dematerialized at his approach, the crystal recognizing his biometric signature. Inside, the space had been transformed. What should have been standard diplomatic accommodations now resembled a Viridian sanctuary. Low cushions surrounding a central flame, walls hung with woven tapestries depicting star maps, and the air perfumed with the distinct spice of Heimla root, reminiscent of Viridia's highlands. "You came," Thalia said, appearing from an adjacent room. She had shed her formal armor, dressed now in a simple tunic that revealed more of the luminescent patterns covering her arms and shoulders. Without the official trappings, she seemed younger, though no less formidable. "We need to talk," Elian said, trying to maintain professionalism despite the intimate setting. Thalia gestured to the cushions. "Please sit, share flame with me." Elian hesitated, aware that sharing flame carried ritual significance in Viridian culture, though he wasn't certain of its exact meaning. "It is just conversation," she assured him, reading his hesitation. "Though on Viridia, words shared in firelight are considered especially truthful." He sat across from her, the flickering flame between them casting moving shadows across her features. "Thalia, I need to explain what happened 10 years ago. On Earth, making casual promises about future marriage isn't binding. It's sometimes done as a way to make children feel special or important." "And I was just a child to you," she said, her patterns shifting to deeper blues. "Yes, no, I mean you were bright, curious, special. But I was 25, you were maybe 12, I never imagined. That I would remember, that I would hold to our bond." Her eyes reflected the flame. "The vow you made came during our darkest time. My father had been killed 3 days before. My mother was missing. Your words gave me hope when I had none." Guilt washed over Elian. "I'm sorry, I didn't know." "Don't apologize for saving me," she said firmly. "After you left, I dedicated myself to 3 goals: to learn everything about Earth, to end our civil war, and to find you again." Pride radiated from her. "I have accomplished 2 of these goals." Elian watched her luminescence pulse with confidence and suddenly saw her accomplishments in new light. "You helped end the war. I united the 7th House with 3 others. Our coalition forced peace negotiations." She leaned forward. "The tablet you gave me, I learned strategy from your military texts, diplomacy from your history. I applied everything to our situation." Elian struggled to process this. His casual gift had shaped not just her life, but potentially the fate of an entire planet. "And now you're here," he said quietly. "Now I am here." Thalia's patterns shifted to warm amber tones. "Not to force you into a bond you don't desire, but to give you the chance to know me as I truly am." "I'd like that," he admitted, surprising himself with his sincerity. "But Thalia, our cultures, our physiologies, there are significant differences." She smiled then, a gesture she must have practiced for human interaction. "Differences create strength when properly aligned. Another lesson from your books." The flame between them flared suddenly, reflecting in her eyes. In that moment, Elian realized the simple truth he'd been avoiding. He was drawn to her, not from obligation or guilt, but genuine fascination with the extraordinary woman she'd become. "Would you show me?" he asked impulsively. "Your home through your eyes, not the diplomatic presentations, but the real Viridia you know." Thalia's patterns erupted in bright pulses. "I can do better." She reached into a container beside her and withdrew what looked like a neural interface. "This is a memory crystal. It can share experiences directly." As their discussion stretched into the night, boundaries of species and culture began to blur. When Elian finally left her quarters hours later, the diplomatic mission remained unchanged, but his perception of it, and of her, had transformed completely. 3 weeks into the Viridian delegation's stay, Elian found himself in unfamiliar territory, both literally and emotionally. The Botanical Garden's xenological wing housed carefully maintained habitats for non-terrestrial flora, including a section dedicated to Viridian plant life. It was here that Thalia had asked to meet him, away from the political machinery that consumed their days. "These flowers," she said, gesturing to vibrant blue blooms that pulsed with light similar to Viridian skin patterns, "grow only in the aftermath of destruction. Their seeds can lie dormant for centuries, awakening when the soil is disturbed by warfare. Elian gently touched one of the petals. Beauty from devastation. Yes, Thalia's own patterns rippled in response to the flowers. My people call them promise blossoms. They represent renewal after loss. Over the past weeks, Elian had spent every free moment with Thalia. Through shared meals, memory crystals, and long conversations, he'd seen her world through her eyes, its devastation and revival, its ancient traditions and evolving future. And something unexpected had happened in the process. He'd fallen for her. The delegation leaves in 7 days, he said, voicing the concern that had been growing as their time together dwindled. Thalia nodded, her patterns shifting to deeper blues. The treaty negotiations are nearly complete. We have accomplished what we came for politically. And personally, Elian asked, his heart racing. That remains unresolved. She turned to face him fully. In Viridian tradition, promises are sacred because they transcend temporary emotion. They connect souls across time and circumstance. I'm beginning to understand that, Elian admitted, but I still don't know how to reconcile our worlds. A slight smile crossed Thalia's features. Perhaps you are thinking too practically. Some questions cannot be resolved with engineering solutions. She was right. He'd spent weeks analyzing logistics, biological compatibility, career implications, interstellar living arrangements, while avoiding the central question, what did he truly want? There's something I need to show you, Thalia said, reaching into a pocket of her ceremonial garment. She withdrew a small device that projected a holographic image between them. The data tablet he'd given her years ago, now worn and modified with Viridian technology. You kept it, he whispered. It contains everything that brought me to you. She manipulated the projection, revealing thousands of notes, annotations, and personal reflections spanning a decade. This became my guide to your world, your people, your heart. Elian reached out, his fingers passing through the projection to touch her hand. The contact sent visible waves of light cascading up her arm, her luminescence responding involuntarily to his touch. What does that mean? He asked, gesturing to the pattern. Her amber eyes met his, vulnerability evident despite their alien nature. It means my soul recognizes yours. She took a breath. Among my people, physical touch is reserved for those with established bonds. What you feel is my life energy responding to you. The intimate revelation hung between them, more meaningful than any diplomatic accord they'd negotiated. With gentle deliberation, Elian moved closer and placed his palm against her cheek. Light erupted beneath his touch, flowing across her features in patterns of breathtaking complexity. I may have spoken carelessly years ago, he said softly, but standing here now, I find myself wanting to make new promises, ones I fully understand and intend to keep. Thalia's luminescence intensified, casting both their faces in ethereal light. Then speak them, she whispered, and I will hear. In the quiet sanctuary of alien blooms, surrounded by life that had emerged from destruction, Elian finally let go of practicality and embraced the sacred promise that had brought them together across the stars. The Earth-Viridian Treaty signing ceremony was scheduled for noon. At 11, Elian stood before the Interstellar Relations Council, his resignation documents projected on the display before them. Commander Novak, Admiral Liang said, her expression grave, you understand what you're giving up. Your position here is secure, your career trajectory. With respect, Admiral, Elian interrupted, I've considered this thoroughly. He had, for 7 days and nights following his revelation in the botanical gardens, he had weighed every factor, calculated every risk. The engineer in him had demanded complete analysis. The man in him already knew the answer. Very well, the Admiral's tone softened slightly. The Council will accept your resignation, effective after the treaty ceremony. You've earned the right to choose your path. An hour later, Elian watched from the sidelines as diplomats from both worlds finalized the historic agreement. Thalia stood tall among her delegation, her ceremonial armor catching the light as she pressed her palm to the authentication panel. The treaty would ensure 50 years of cooperation, technological exchange, and mutual defense. When the formalities concluded, Thalia found him in the crowd. It is done, she said, her patterns glowing with satisfaction. Our worlds are now officially aligned. Not just our worlds, Elian replied, producing a small box from his pocket. Inside lay two items, a traditional Earth wedding band and a Viridian bond crystal that he'd commissioned from their finest artisans. Thalia's luminescence flared with emotion. "You have decided." "I have." Elian took her hand, aware of the curious onlookers, but focused only on her. 10 years ago, I made a promise I didn't understand. Today, I make one I do." He placed the crystal in her palm. "I choose you, Thalia of Veridia, not from obligation, but from love." Her patterns shifted to brilliant gold, joy he had learned in Viridian emotional language. "And I choose you, Elian of Earth, as I have every day since we first met." The murmurs from the diplomatic corps grew as they exchanged the symbols. His ring on her finger, her crystal embedded temporarily in his wrist, where it would remain until the formal bonding ceremony on Veridia. Admiral Liang approached, eyebrows raised. "I assume this explains your resignation, Commander." "Yes, Admiral. I'll be joining the reconstruction efforts on Veridia. As it happens, they need engineers who understand both worlds." "And husbands," Thalia added with the slight smile she'd perfected for human interaction. The Admiral shook her head, but couldn't entirely hide her approval. "We'll expect regular reports on the infrastructure projects, Commander. This doesn't exempt you from your expertise being valuable to Earth." "Of course not," Elian assured her. "Bridges between worlds require maintenance from both sides." Later, as they prepared to board the Viridian vessel, Elian looked back at the Earth skyline, the world he had known, the life he was leaving behind. Uncertainty still lingered at the edges of his decision, as it would for any life-altering choice. Thalia stood beside him, her hand in his, her luminescence pulsing in sync with his heartbeat, a biological resonance that Viridian scientists couldn't entirely explain. "Having doubts?" she asked quietly. Elian turned to her, seeing both the determined child she had been and the extraordinary woman she had become. "No, just acknowledging the journey." "All journeys contain unknowns," she said. "That is what makes them worth taking." As they boarded the ship, Elian thought about promises, how a few casual words spoken to comfort a child had altered the course of 2 lives and potentially 2 civilizations. What he had offered as momentary kindness, she had received as eternal truth. And somehow, across time and space and profound differences, that misunderstanding had become the most honest thing in his life. The ship sealed, ready for departure. Behind them lay Earth and history. Ahead lay Veridia and possibility. "Ready?" Thalia asked, her patterns glowing with anticipation. Elian smiled, taking her hand as the engines engaged. "I promise I am."